The Thousand Suns are a traitor Space Marine Legion created as the 15th Legion of the Legione Astartes. During the early days of the Great Crusade, an unexpected peculiarity would begin to manifest throughout the Legion, with many Battle Brothers finding themselves able to produce a variety of warp-based abilities. This in itself was a side effect of their gene seed being drawn from the Primarch Magnus the Red, who was the most psychically potent of all the Primarchs. While this unforeseen development of psychic powers throughout the Thousand Suns was initially seen as an unexpected yet welcome boon, this phenomenon would be followed by a mass outbreak of uncontrollable mutations that affected thousands upon thousands of the Legion's warriors. This particular flaw discovered within the gene seed of the Thousand Suns would become known throughout the Legion as the Flesh Change. The curse of the Flesh Change would grow so rampant that many within the Imperium's upper hierarchy would even propose the notion of disbanding the 15th Legion altogether, and expunge all trace of their existence from Imperial records. Following the Legion's reunion with their gene sire upon the world of Prospero, the Flesh Change had begun to manifest uncontrollably throughout the Legion, forcing the remaining elements of the Thousand Suns to remain upon their new homeworld while Imperial forces continued to undertake the Great Crusade. Magnus the Red was eventually able to stabilize the genetic sequence of those least affected by the flaw, through a pact made with a warp entity that would be revealed to be none other than the Chaos God Tzeentch. Though barely 1,000 of the Thousand Suns survived the effects of the Flesh Change, the flaw would begin to enter a state of remission, allowing the Thousand Suns a chance to rebuild their Legion. When the Primarch Leman Russ and his Space Wolves Legion were manipulated by the traitorous Warmaster Horus Lupercal to lay waste to Prospero prior to the events of the Horus Heresy, the surviving members of the Thousand Suns would eventually seek sanctuary with the traitor legions, and over time the Legion would dedicate themselves to Tzeentch. The Thousand Suns would prove instrumental to Horus's forces, and would even successfully create a warp tear that allowed a massive traitor Legion armada to enter the orbit of Terra itself, bypassing the majority of the Sol System's defensive network in the process. The traitor legions would ultimately be defeated by the Loyalists during this Great War, however, and the Thousand Suns would flee into the warp space rift known as the Eye of Terror, retreating to the demon world of Sortiarius, the planet of sorcerers. It was here within the warp that the effects of the Flesh Change would return with a vengeance, afflicting more and more members of the Legion with various mutations. While some viewed these deformities as blessings that were bestowed upon them by Tzeentch, many within the Legion would fear that the Thousand Suns would devolve into being little more than gibbering chaos spawn. The chief librarian of the Legion, Ahriman, along with a conclave of his most trusted sorcerers, would prepare a great spell that Ahriman believed would rid the Legion of their curse for all time. This spell, called the Rubric, was so powerful that the storm of magical energies left in the wake of its casting would cause even demons to flee in terror. For countless days and nights, the planet of sorcerers would be enveloped by the effects of the Rubric, with many of the Legion's warriors being struck down by bolts of magical lightning. The spell itself would only end when Magnus himself would intervene. The spell was both a tremendous success and utter failure. Those Thousand Suns with pronounced psychic abilities would find themselves cured of the Flesh Change, and not only that, but their powers would be greatly augmented. However, those Battle Brothers that displayed little to no psychic capability would have their bodies transformed into dust. Their armor would magically seal itself shut, trapping their souls within for all eternity, leaving them as little more than mindless automata. These beings would become known henceforth as Rubric Marines. Magnus would become enraged by Ahriman's actions, and in his anger exiled the sorcerer and his conclave from Sortiarius. Ahriman would then seek to undo the damage he had wrought upon his legion, and would begin searching for a way to restore his brothers to true life. But one question needs to be asked. Since the gene vaults of Terra contain the gene seed of all 20 Space Marine legions, then what sort of effect could the Rubric have had upon the genetic stock of the Thousand Sons? Admittedly, it is somewhat difficult to speculate what fate could befall a newly founded chapter should it utilize gene seed drawn from the Thousand Sons Legion. While some chapters have been rumoured or even loosely implied to be descendants of the 15th Legion, such as the Blood Ravens, there are no confirmed accounts of a Loyalist chapter being birthed from such forbidden genetic stock. But even if a new chapter were founded from the gene seed of the Thousand Sons, there is still the prospect of the Rubric to contend with. As mentioned earlier, when the Rubric was cast, those members of the Legion whose psychic powers were minimal or even non-existent would be turned to dust, doomed to remain forever trapped within the confines of their now magically sealed armor. While it could initially be argued that the Rubric itself only affected the Thousand Sons of that specific point in time, there is evidence to the contrary. The novel Ashes of Prospero details a location upon Prospero known as the Portal Maze, similar in function to the subspace network of the Webway that existed beyond the boundaries of time and reality. Within the Portal Maze, a time-displaced company of the Thousand Sons would continue to battle in the defense of Prospero against the space wolves of the 13th Great Company under the command of Bolvi Greybeard, though both forces remained unaware that over 10,000 years had passed outside the confines of the maze. When a number of these Heresy-era Thousand Sons attempted to exit the maze, they would immediately succumb to the effects of the Rubric, as detailed with the following passage.
The lead squad of Thousand Sons stepped out of the breach, surrounded by an aura of azure power, the Vexillor at their head holding high the icon of his company. The portal's crackle was lost in the crash of boots striding in unison. The order to open fire was on Jarl's lips, the staff in his hand gleaming with psychic power as he readied bolts of vengeance. The Vexillor faltered in his next step, and the legionary to his right stumbled also, the crack of armor and steady step replaced with a clutter of banging ceramite as one warrior tottered into another. As though suddenly finding the footing unstable, the whole squad staggered, their perfect coordination lost within 2 strides. The icon crashed against the tiles from the standard-bearer's fingers even as his legs buckled and he plunged face first to the floor. The rest of the squad collapsed likewise, not with any great flailing or drama, simply lowering to their knees and then falling face down. One of the legionary's helmet lenses caught the edge of a dropped bolter and cracked open. White dust spilled from the gash, sparkling for a moment with weird power before the escaping soul dispatched, leaving only a drift of ash-like residue. Nia laughed hoarsely. Dust. All is dust.
Since these particular Thousand Sons were completely unaffected by the effects of the Rubric whilst they remained within the Portal Maze, which, to reiterate, existed beyond the boundaries of time and reality, this would seem to suggest that any Astartes who bears the gene seed of Magnus the Red would also succumb to the Rubric. The only possible exception would be those individuals that display a strong psychic potential, due to the fact that the most powerful of Thousand Sun sorcerers were not affected in this particular manner by the spell. With this in mind, if the Imperium did indeed desire to utilize Thousand Sun's genetic stock in order to found a new chapter of the Adeptus Astartes, is there any possible way for them to do so without potential aspirants succumbing to the effects of the Rubric? The most obvious method in potentially avoiding both the inherent flaws found within Thousand Sun's genetic stock, the flesh change, and the curse of the Rubric, would be to genetically modify the gene seed itself, in order to prevent these flaws from manifesting within aspirant Astartes. There have been many attempts throughout Imperial history to remove the various physical and psychological flaws that exist within a multitude of Space Marine chapters. The most notable in this regard would be the chapters of the 21st Cursed Founding, who ironically and almost universally would see a number of gene seed flaws increase in frequency and extremity as opposed to having such deficiencies removed. One Cursed Founding chapter in particular could potentially have drawn their gene seed stock from the Thousand Suns Legion, the Flame Falcons. This is due to a specific gene seed flaw that the Flame Falcons demonstrated: spontaneous combustion. This flaw would begin to manifest throughout the chapter less than a century after their creation, during the battle for Raffenberg's world, and while the flames that enveloped the Astartes would not hurt the Flame Falcons themselves, they could still inflict untold devastation upon their foes. While the majority of the Flame Falcons viewed this spontaneous combustion as both a miracle and a gift from the Emperor himself, the chapter master, fearing mutation, would send for the Inquisition to investigate the cause of this phenomena. The Inquisition, however, would deem that the Flame Falcons were corrupted by chaos, declaring them excommunicati traitoris. The chapter would ultimately be destroyed by the Grey Knights, though it is rumoured that a small number of Flame Falcons managed to escape the carnage. This flaw exhibited by the Flame Falcons is similar to a particular variant of the flesh change, which would cause several members of the Thousand Suns Legion to also undergo a form of spontaneous combustion, transforming these once proud Astartes into little more than living pyres. One of the most notable of these individuals would be detailed within the story Thief of Revelations, with a legionary known as Astenu. Astenu was once a member of the Pyre cult, who, as a result of the flesh change, was mutated into a creature of living flame, though would display a number of additional disfigurements that, admittedly, were far more extreme than those displayed by the Flame Falcons. It has also been documented that extreme modifications to an Astartes' physical and spiritual form can render those who bear the gene seed of the Thousand Suns immune to both the flaws of the flesh change and the Rubric. In this case, this was demonstrated with the loyalist Thousand Son, Revulavada, who, in order to save his life from the ever-increasing effects of the flesh change, would have a fragment of the soul of Magnus the Red sealed within his body by Malkador the Sigillite, with the Regent of Terra intending to use the resulting abomination to guard the Terran Webway Gate. Arvida's body would become consumed by psychic fire, before he would finally be transformed into a new entity entirely, one that would become known as Janus. As a result, Janus was cured of the flesh change and even rendered immune to the effects of the Rubric when the spell was cast. Admittedly though, this particular method of purging the flaws of the flesh change and the Rubric is so esoteric in nature that it would appear to be logistically impossible to apply on a scale necessary to found an entire Space Marine chapter. Ultimately, until the effects of the Rubric are able to be reversed and restore the Sons of Magnus to true life, it may prove to be a complete impossibility for any non-psychic Astartes to be created utilizing their specific genetic stock. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.